The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.
Okay, we're going to get going. There's a solution, chapter 2. So just a little intro on this chapter. So doctor's opinion is about the allergy, primarily the allergy. There's a solution chapter really accentuates the hopeless nature of the illness. It's about really showing you how much we need, like the rest of the steps, or how much we need God, right? And really trying to show you the hopeless feature of this disease. And then the other chapter, this part of step 1, is more about alcoholism. That chapter shows you about the thinking that precedes the first drink, what type of thoughts go through our mind. A lot of people don't really know that these chapters are very significant in what they're trying to teach you, but we will do that as we go through this. We don't do Bill's story. I don't do Bill's story when I sponsor somebody right off the bat. I like to do Bill's story at the end of the big book study because it ties all of the program together. Hopefully we can do that in the time limit that we have to do the study. If anyone's wondering why we're not doing Bill's story, that's why. Because all of step 1, all of the steps are in Bill's story. So we'll put it in that. Okay, let's go. First page, yeah. Just first page, though.
Okay. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally wouldn't mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to the captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element of the powerful cement that binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us that we have discovered a common solution. We have found a way on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism.
Okay, I'll go first. So just, it's just talking about we are people who would normally not mix, right? There exists among us a fellowship of friendliness and understanding which is indescribably wonderful. That's just being an alcoholic and an addict. You're an alcoholic addict. I'm an alcoholic addict. When we first came to the programs, we really got some value out of that, right? Hearing other people sharing our story and like knowing that we're not alone, right? That knowing that you're not alone was really important when we first get here. But it also talks about joyousness, democracy, camaraderie, from vestige to steerage to captain's table. Steerage is the bottom of a boat. So steerage is the bottom of a boat. On the Titanic, that's where all the poor people were. Captain's table was at the top. So everybody in between, from the rich to the poorest, everybody is afflicted with alcoholism if you're an alcoholic. Doesn't matter who you are, and the disease doesn't really care who you are, okay? So that's important. But that's tradition 3. If you have a desire not to drink, you're welcome. You're welcome, right? If you have a desire not to use, you're welcome in the program. But as we go down, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Just being an alcoholic and having that camaraderie isn't enough. That's one element in the powerful cement that binds us. The tremendous fact for every one of us that we had discovered a common solution. We have a way out which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. And that's an important line. This is the great news. The news is joining in brotherly and harmonious action. The principle behind step 8 is brotherly love. Like really accepting and getting along with your brother and loving your brother and packing into the stream of life harmonious action. And as we suffer from selfish self-centeredness, that is not actually what happens if we don't work the steps. We're not brotherly and harmonious if we're not work the steps. So what I want to highlight here is there's 2 fellowships, okay? There's the fellowship of tradition 3, which is what the mass of the program is actually. Everyone's an alcoholic addict and we join in that. But there's another fellowship here, the one that we join in brotherly and harmonious action. And I want you to flip to page 164 quickly just to point that out. 164. The last paragraph on page 164. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. So as you look at that prayer or that segment of the big book, it's the very last paragraph out of the first 164 pages, which is the solution to our lives. It talks about abandoning yourself to God, which is your step 3, like surrendering that initial part of your life when you get to step 3. Admitting your faults to him and your fellows, step 4 and 5. Clearing away the wreckage of your past, step 6, 7, 8, and 9, essentially. And give freely of what you find and join us. Giving freely of this in your 12th step and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of God, the fellowship of the Spirit. And it says you will surely meet some people, some of us, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Not everyone's working in the fellowship of the Spirit. Not everyone's working in the fellowship of God. So that's a small fellowship. Okay, and that's important to know. And it talks about trudging the road of happy destiny. Trudging in 1939, when you look that up, it means walking with purpose. Doesn't mean walking up to your neck with problems. If you're walking up to your neck in problems still, and you're 12-stepped and you've worked this program, something's missing. You should be walking with purpose. And the book tells me in step 9, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the fellows about us. But Bill W. is smart. He starts out with our greatest deficit, me as an alcoholic addict, and all my terrible experiences. I can use that as an asset to help another person out. So as I start that process of sharing my experiences of my debauchery and all of the terrible things that have happened to me or that I've done, I can now use that to build compassion for my fellow human being. And down the road, I can practice this in all of my affairs. And I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows, no matter who they are, outside of the program. May God bless you and keep you until then. That's kind of like a warning. May God bless you and keep you until then. Until what? You find the fellowship of the Spirit. That's important, okay? That's all. Go ahead, Brandon.
I could probably comment on a lot of things, but for me, that's my favorite 2 paragraphs on page 164 in the whole thing. And it's resonated with me my entire 20-something years of recovery. But for me, those capitalized words in here are something. And on that particular paragraph that you just read, there's a solution bill. There's a particular capitalized word that drew my attention today that it hasn't drawn before, and that's captain's table. So when I look at this room and the rooms of this program, it allows me to hear different perspectives from different life experiences from people from different cultures. And that allows me, if I walk into this room open-minded enough to hear something that I might want to adopt and experiment with in my own mind and in my own life. Okay, and that allows me, it allows us as a group to cooperate in this vessel-like experience of from steerage to captain's table, wherever we're at. But the part that just clicked for me is it allows us to move from steerage to captain's table. Okay, that capitalized C says something to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the fellowship of the Spirit being capitalized, says something.
That was amazing, bro.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
I was going to add to what Bill said there that I don't think it's the absence of problems. I think that life is a series of problems, and it's difficult. Life is difficult, and it's, you know, how do you come to your problems? And I think that, you know, I get the best sense of how we're supposed to come to that from step 10 in the 12 by 12, where they talk about the acid test, where being sober is like the beginning. And then it says, but can I be sober and keep an emotional balance and be helpful to everybody in all situations? And that's the acid test. So it's like, everybody has problems, but like, I know with working with others where when I first meet them, it's like the problems are the problems, and it's like, problems, all these things, and there is no emotional balance at all. And it's just like the reaction, more problem, the reaction, and, you know, the insanity of self, really. And so over time, as a person keeps doing the stuff and doing the steps and turning over whatever they can at any point, all the time, whenever they can, and they remember, and they slowly start to give themselves back to their defects, back to God, and be restored. And the emotional balance is the evidence of that. And so the problems come, but the emotions stay in check, and it's an appropriate reaction, because the goal is not to have any emotion. The goal is to have an appropriate emotional reaction to the situation, and to have, because we're supposed to have emotion. We're supposed to feel all those things. And in a lot of ways, that's how we connect, and that's how we experience life. But it's like these blown out of proportion ego emotions that get in the way of our ability to be helpful, for one thing, but also just our ability to actually experience life as it should be unfolding and experienced. And so as a person recovers, and what I see, and I really see it in other people, because when I first meet them and start working with them, it's like the emotional balance isn't there. But then, you know, even a month or two down the road, and something really big happens, and they're able to come to it with like sanity, and it is sad, and it is painful, and there is uncertainty, and there's some anxiety in there, but the emotions are in display to it, and the ability to pause and to be able to just wait and not do anything. So there's no reaction. It's like you have the emotional experience. There's some time and space that'll pause, pray, proceed thing can be applied for real. And then in that, you're able to then be helpful in that situation, because we blow it when our emotions we're not helpful to anybody. And a lot of times when people are having emotional experiences like that, it's because they care about the person. The person's right there and they're going through something, or something's happening. And if you can't have emotional balance, you can't be helpful. And then you have more problems. And so recovery is really about, we get to show up, and that's the showing up, is that we get a proper display of emotions. We get to pause and not react. And in that, then we get to be helpful, and we're helpful. And then we're not struggling, like we can have life experience and unfold and be stable. And that's the attraction to me, is like the ability to go through problems that even normal people, they don't know what they're doing. And we get a kind of a direction on how to navigate that. And there's an attractiveness even to people who aren't in recovery that ask me, how are you doing this? You know, church people have asked me, how did you recover? How can you keep in? It's like, well, I just did the steps. And it sounds so silly, and the steps get a bad reputation, but you know, we are the evidence and the selling feature of this. And so I really believe in the attraction versus promotion, because it's been happening for me. And I don't know, I just think that we have such a gift, and I see it working, and it makes me believe in it so much more in working with others. And so if the person isn't working with others, they're missing like a great majority of what this stuff is all about. Because you can't see it in yourself. A lot of times you can kind of see it, but you can really see it in other people. And that has helped me to believe in a higher power more and more and more. And a lot of my faith has come through witnessing this happen for other people. And I'm like, wow, this is like, they're not faking it, you know?
Amazing. Okay.
It's amazing when he actually lets me talk and listen. Like, whoa.
Fill up. What's his name? Lessons from alcohol. From him?
Shut up, Paul.
You know,
Okay, are you gonna keep reading, or am I?
An illness of this sort, as we have come to believe it is an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferer. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole department shouts at the new prospect, that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatsoever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up the beds and walk again.
Okay, back to the top of 18. I love how Bill writes this. An illness of this sort, hyphen, and we have come to believe it is an illness. Kind of like what I was alluding to earlier was many people don't believe this is an illness. They haven't come to believe in their innermost self that they are different, right? And people that haven't gone through this material and they just try to get sober through the psychologist and the psychiatrist or whatever, they don't really understand the depth of the illness. So they haven't come to believe that they have an illness. And as we keep moving through the study and through our own recoveries, we come in here and sure, we can admit the obsession, I guess, and then we can kind of maybe agree with the allergy. It explains many things which we cannot otherwise account. But as you stay around here longer and you get past those two things, you start seeing there's much more to this illness than the allergy and the obsession. It's like the spiritual malady. It's the resentment. It's the judgment. It's the sex. It's the relationships. It's the defective character, right? The defective character drives this illness. And if I don't get a handle on this defective character, then I will pick up a drink again. Or I live very discontented and miserable. And I try to seek other methods of relief, right? Because the ego wants relief. So we have to come to believe we have the illness. And that's why a lot of people are here, right? You guys know you have the illness. Now let's get deeper into what it really is, the spiritual malady. The book talks about when the spiritual maladies overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So when I work on the spiritual component of a spiritual illness, then I straighten out mentally and I straighten out physically. Janine alluded to in her last share about the balance of being able to handle things, right? Because the mind, when it's not well, it strikes emotions and then we go into like reaction mode or whatever it is, right? But when we can bring God in, when we're working on that spiritual component, everything else just lines up. And I'll say that the physical part of this, where we want to take care of our bodies, we want to take care of our health, and that part comes down the road, right? So as we work out our solution on the spiritual, then the mental starts to calm down. We're able to handle things. And then later we're like, I want to take care of my body. I want to start working out. I want to do these things. I want to connect with the land. I want to start hiking, right? But I think what a lot of people do, men are especially subject to this, is they go and work on the body first. They're working out and they're doing all these things and they want to look good for the women. And then the spiritual goes to the side and the mental's not really well yet. And then they end up relapsing because it's all based in validation still, right? The workout part, right? They'll come in here and start doing the spiritual. And then the spiritual kind of takes them to the next stage, but they don't really work on the mental, which is, you know, the defective character. And they work on the physical and then they're relapsed again. So that's important. If a person has cancer, we are all sorry for them. No one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. So that's the little things. What gets annihilated? Think of that word. For me, it was jumping on the trampoline with my kids. It was going fishing. It was doing the simple things, watching hockey on a Saturday night, you know, hanging out with my family in the evening around a campfire in our backyard on the acreage. You know, maybe going for a bike ride or a walk down by the lake when I used to live in Chestermere, right? All those things were annihilated. Those are the things that made my life worthwhile, right? Maybe for some of you, it's drawing or playing music or, you know, whatever it is for you. Those things get annihilated, right? And for those who are sponsoring, this paragraph here is super important because what step one is actually trying to do, step one is a low vibrating step. It's actually designed in the book to humble you, to make you feel the pain. And as you go through this piece right here, you take these lines and you ask that person, okay, what was annihilated in your life? And you share your experiences. And then, you know, dig some out of them. It engulfs all those who touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment. Ask them, who were you resentful at? Who was resentful at you? Who did you engulf in your addiction? What kind of things happened in your life to burn it down? And how angry were people with you? Because honestly, the people don't really want to talk about how mad people are at them. But it's really important to bring this up so that they feel that pain, right? This is designed to feel the pain. Anyone who's worked with Jesse, they know the pain of what this process does. Jesse's an expert at bringing this step one, humility, the pain and suffering out of the guys that he works with. Okay? Hey, Andrew. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers. Who wants to talk about disgusted friends that you've really harmed, that they think you're just a piece of shit? That's important for us to talk about as you take somebody through this material, so they feel that pain. Okay, I'm gonna quickly go down.
I just need to say something.
Go for it.
Because so there's times when people need to be built back up. Like if I'm working with somebody who's just so broken. And this paragraph has actually been used in my world more to build someone up a little bit so that they can carry on in sobriety and not take themselves out with their own self-pity and their own pain. Because, you know, what this is talking about, even the paragraphs after where it says alcoholics aren't going to talk to people who, like even the doctors, because it's hard, you can't explain it. Like if as he was reading this, I was thinking of this time I was over top of my sink and I was trying to get ready for work and I was puking and then nothing was coming up and I was like dry heaving and it was just like saliva. And my son came up, he must have been, I don't even know, he was in elementary still. He's like, Mom, what's wrong? And I was like shaking and I was like I'm like, oh, I just gagged on the toothbrush or whatever. And like, I remember thinking like, what am I doing? Like, I am such a pathetic mess. Like, what am I like? And I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't stop drinking. And like trying to explain those moments to a doctor, he's not going to get it. Like all of you would get it from me just saying that. Like, you know, your kids are standing on the stairs and you're not functioning. And I was shaking, and the amount of anxiety in that moment is just like that stuff. I can't accurately even like explain. I don't need to accurately explain it. I can give you just the little synopsis there and everybody's like, yep, yeah, oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I don't even need to get into it. Like I could say the terror in that moment and the anxiety that was through the roof and my son's face, you guys all get it, you know, but trying to communicate that to a doctor, I think it's like, I know that I tried to communicate and then immediately I felt misunderstood, judged, whatever that was, and then I just don't even bother because it's futile. It's like, why am I even explaining? Because this person isn't going to get it and they're going to give me a bunch of shit that I don't believe in, that I know that isn't going to solve my problems because I've probably tried it. And so the same with the friends and the partners. Like I laugh at this where it's like, strangely enough, wives and parents and all these people close to us, like, what do you mean strangely? They're pissed right off. I'm not telling them the truth. But strangely enough, we don't talk to them either. But the ex-problem drinker, they understand, and you don't even got to get into it. And so it's so much easier to talk about the things that we've never talked about because we don't got to barely talk about it. And then I think in that we get the hang of talking about it, because it starts with just a couple of phrases and someone's like, I totally get it. And you know that they do. And so I think for me, some of that has been part of my ability to process it, is that I didn't really know until I started talking about it with another alcoholic. And then I could really sort it out for myself too, but it had to be with somebody who totally knew my experience. And yeah, so sometimes more than using it to break somebody, I use it to build them back up, where I say, hey, I get it. Like, I know the total annihilation where it's like, you're annihilating everything worthwhile in your life and you can't stop. And the pain that comes from that can sometimes be what keeps somebody stuck and unable to get sober. And so sometimes they just need some validation that, you know, it's going to be okay. I know that pain and it's okay for me. And I'm over that pain now. Things got better if you just stay sober and you just toe the line and just do what this book tells us to do. And it'll be better for you too.
More amazingness. No, that was fucking great. But what I would like to say also on that is, as you sponsor, she's right. You can't just take people down, right? There's a balance to this. And learning how to balance that and use the humility and the pain and then building them back up, and kind of, it's like a back and forth thing. And depending on what type of alcoholic you're working with will depend on how some of that is used as well. But that only comes through the experience of working with many different types of people. And then you start connecting more. The more you work with people, the more you connect with God, the more you connect with yourself, and the better you can draw on intuitive thought and inspiration and in all of this of what we're talking about, right? And a lot of, I guess, I don't know, probably more women are.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a gender difference as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully with some of this.
Right. So her experience is more of that because the women are however they are. And a lot of the guys that I work with or that, you know, are out there, they need a little bit of a beat down, right? Balanced beat down, right?
I think some of that too has to do with a lot of women are mothers, and there's a difference in that too. There's a tenderness around that just men don't have the same maternal kind of thing going on.
Roger. So, and then I'm just going to quickly go down, but the ex-problem drinker has found the solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So in the allergy and the obsession and the spiritual malady, as you kind of talk about succumbing to the desire, not being able to stay stopped, when you put it in your body, you have little control in the amount you take. When you're first approaching somebody new, all of that stuff's really important because it starts making sense to him, right? Yeah, I've tried to stop too, and you share your experience of trying to stop putting one drink in your body, because a lot of people think it's like the 10th drink, right? When you can kind of articulate that, no, it was the first drink, and then you kind of show them in your life how that actually transpired into like 25 drinks and fucking on the streets or in jail or whatever, right? They start going, yeah, okay, that makes good sense. But, you know, to the other part of the illness, the ex-problem drinker has found the solution. I can share my defective character of anger and lust and porn and gambling and relationships and judgment. I can really share that stuff and the person can relate too, right? But as you're introducing yourself to some of these new people, or you meet somebody kind of not even in the program, you can win their entire confidence in a few hours. Like, it honestly doesn't take me long. I meet people all the time that know nothing about this illness, and then within an hour or two, they want to know more. They're coming to a meeting because it's really, you get good at this, right? You get good at being able to connect with them, right? That the man, here we go, that the man who is making the approach would be me or you. If you're in the rooms, hopefully if you're in the rooms, you're going to meet the newcomer. You're going to say hi to them. And it takes time, right? You got to sometimes say hi to somebody 15 times before they say hi back. You know, maybe it's out on the patio having a smoke, you know, at halftime or on the step. And then finally they start talking to you. But that's what this takes. It takes consistent, persistent commitment to engage with these people because they're very insecure and they're shy and they're fearful and they're embarrassed. And like, for you to accept them and make them feel welcomed over time, it'll break them out of their shell. So I implore anybody here who's trying to work with alcoholics or learn how to get good at this, keep talking to people, keep saying hi to them. Just say hi. If that's all it takes. And you know, that's you guys know me. I say hi to everybody. I always want to talk to people. I'll sit out in front of the meeting and wait for the treatment van to show up, right? And I'll say hi to all those guys because it's important, man. They need that. They want that. And if you don't, they'll judge you. But if you're nice to them, they quit judging. Right? I know that for a fact. So he has the same difficulty. I have all the same difficulties as him. And I obviously know what I'm talking about. His whole deportment shouts at the new prospect. He is the man with the real answer. Whole deportment is the body energy. All parts of that being somebody who's recovered, when they share from the podium or they're sharing or they're walking with that confidence, their whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's the man with the real answer. And when you're really passionate about this, if it changed your life so much, or if you see enough people die who don't get it, it really inspires you to carry that message strong. A lot of people wonder why I'm kind of like the way I am. if you've seen enough death like I have, then you'll understand why. And some guys that I work with, new sponsees, they're like, I wish I could have more of like that conviction you have. Well, 3 years later, they have the conviction. Why? Because they've been around and some of their sponsees have died and people die. It gives you more conviction. And if you see what works, this program, and you see what doesn't work, fucking around, then you're really more inspired to be in the literature and sharing these experiences. Has a no attitude, holier than thou, nothing but ever with a sincere desire to be helpful. There are no fees to pay. Well, there are kind of fees to pay, okay? The fees to pay are being of service, going to meetings, not going to meetings to take, going to meetings to share your experience, and praying before you share that somebody might hear something, and sponsoring and service. And these are the fees that we pay. No lectures to be endured. Well, I don't know, sometimes there is, depending on who's sharing. These are the conditions we have found most helpful. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. That's it.
Why do you get me to read it if you're just gonna reread it? Well, I was really wondering. I'm like, we just fucking read that. All right, so do you want to read? Yeah. All right, so none of us make a sole vacation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all of their time to the work. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflections that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we enjoyed. How shall we present that which has been given so freely to us?
Do you want to go first?
You go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to reread what she just read. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Okay? The elimination of the drink is the beginning. It's the first milestone on the new road that we're walking. And you'll notice Bill W. Style, he kind of punches home that same statement again here a little further down. But just for anyone maybe on Zoom or who's here, the problem isn't really drinking. It's thinking, okay? It's our emotions. It's how we view life. And when we put the drink down, that's just the very fucking beginning. A much more important demonstrations of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. It's way more important for me to practice this way of life, not here, out there, at home, at work, and everywhere in my life. That's where the real challenge is. It's easy to put on the mask here and do it here, right? But doing it out there with your spouse, doing it out there with your boss who's an asshole, doing it out there with people who are trying to mind and emotionally manipulate you or other people, and watching this go on with other people and praying for them and doing all the things that we do. It's hard to do that out there. But that's the willingness and honesty. Try repeatedly step 6 on all your faults. But you got to be aware. Without the awareness of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, nothing changes. So you got to be aware first. Once the awareness is there, then willingness kicks in. And honesty and open-mindedness. Those ones are indispensable, right? Like the book says. Next paragraph. If we keep on the way we are going, there's little doubt that much good will result. So if we keep on the way we're going drinking, nothing good happens. If we keep on the way we're going in the defective character, in judgment, anger, and the way we treat people, intimate relationships, and ourselves, a lot of this is how we treat ourselves too. If we keep doing that, not much good is going to result either. And that's where people kind of miss the boat. They don't focus on their defective character and bringing God in, and they stay miserable. A lot of people come and try to get sober and they don't get happy. They white knuckle their whole lives sobriety, and they keep trying to grab at things to make them better, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But the surface of the problem would hardly have been scratched. Those of us who live in large cities like us are overcome by the reflection that close by thousands are dropping into oblivion every day. We all know that. We see people all around us dropping into oblivion every day. And we see them because they're around us. But what about all the ones we don't see? Like, there's so many people that are just dying from this illness, right? They say COVID was a killer, right? There's more people dying from drug and alcohol addiction and spiritual malady than any COVID, right? This is way more important. And I wish our governments and society would get in tune with this, because they could stop it, they could change it, they could do something. But our society's sick in its own right. There's a lot of sickness in the society we live in. And I'm saying the governments and the mental health and our health systems, and I could go into a whole gamut of this kind of shit, but I won't. But many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. So when I work with somebody and they come into the program and they're like so defeated that they have to come here, like this is such a burden in their lives, they're forced to come here to recovery. I'm like, dude, this isn't a life sentence. You don't know that you just got the jackpot of life, like Janine had talked about earlier. How lucky am I to have this? I spent my whole life suffering, trying to find happiness and money and shiny things and all this stuff. And I come here and I got to do these steps and work these steps in my life at a certain level. And my life's never been better. How lucky am I? So showing people how lucky they are to maybe have finally gotten to this point. Like, I know I was talking with Chris here recently, and, you know, I'm just going to share something if you don't mind. He was saying, like, he knows that it's this program and his relationship with God of himself. He can't do what's being done, right? And it's a gift, because living like that is so terrible in our own minds. We don't want to hurt people. We don't want to be that kind of parent. I never wanted to do those things, but I didn't know how not to. And then I come here and I find a blueprint that I can live my life. And I know that of myself, I can't do that. And that was our conversation. Of myself, I cannot be this person. But through this program and through my relationship with God, I can be the best person I've ever been. The only requirement is that I keep an attitude of gratitude, an attitude of God in my life. So when people, you can switch them right in that moment from it's a life sentence to like, maybe this is something really cool that I don't understand yet. And then I'll finish with this. When I sponsor people, and we get to this last line on this paragraph, it's then how then shall we present that is which been so freely given to us? And I ask them, because it's a question mark there. And if I've done my job right as a sponsor, this is just for me, they'll answer, I pass this on to other people. And almost always, for me, they answer that question, because I'm so adamant going through the beginning parts of this book that that's a really important part of this.
Do you tell them about step 6?
I tell them about a lot of shit. That's it.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, I don't know what you were mentioning there, but, oh yeah, governments being sick and this and that. I was just thinking about, there's been a couple of doozies this last couple months where there's been somebody with significant amounts of time doing some really next level fuckery. And so this idea that, oh my God, this person is 50 whatever years sober, and it's the old timers, and like, I think that that's a dangerous attitude to have, and that just because a person has quality of time or quantity of time doesn't mean that they have anything that anybody should be having. And so to really listen to the message and match it up to the book is kind of what I try and do. And then you just intuitively can discern, you know, some things, but I really, there's been some disturbing things. So the quantity of time means nothing, and the message should be, people get mad at me for saying this, but you look it up in the book, make sure you cross-reference this in the book, make sure that you don't just take it like there's lots of things that go on in the rooms that are not Alcoholics Anonymous. Their opinions, and they're dangerous, and just like people are sick, and just because they have a quality of time, just because they're government, just because they're in a position of power, just because doesn't mean that everybody's spiritually fit. And doesn't mean that everybody, like, I don't believe that people maliciously try to hurt. With all that being said, I think that sometimes people just don't know that they're as ill as they are. But working with people, like, girls come and they're just, oh, the newcomer, and they go into rooms and they hear these messages and they idolize people with so much time. And so just as of recently, I've been really saying, like, be careful, you know. I used to stay out of it, but everybody will figure it out on their own time. But there's just been a couple of weird things that I don't say that anymore. I say, like, really be careful of the messages that you're getting, because quantity isn't quality, and not everybody carries the message of Alcoholics Anonymous in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, and on that note, time is important also, right? But it is very important to understand that a lot of people with time in don't have quality recovery. And just because they have the time, like she said, don't just put them on that pedestal, because my opinion, most old timers don't even really know the fucking book.
That's what I was trying not to say. I was struggling with what I was saying, because I'm like, oh, I don't, thank you.
And I love old timers, a lot of them, but a lot of them don't know what's in the book. It's like that moral and philosophical convictions galore. And if the rates of the program were what we read earlier, 50% got sober at once, 25% with some relapses, and the other 25% a better quality of life, why is there only like one old timer at every group with 30 years? Shouldn't it be like 5 or 10 old timers? Shouldn't it be like 5 or 10 guys with 25 years and 30 years, but it's only one or maybe two. So I think what's really important is we carry this message now, and the birthday boards I'm starting to notice have 1111, 222, 333, 444, 555 years. And hopefully those numbers transcend, because I believe that the program is really being instilled in a lot of people because of this kind of thing. And because of the sponsorship that is quality out of the book, not just somebody answering a phone saying, oh, you know what? You know, I'm going to co-sign your shit. You should feel like that. You are the victim. You know what? That guy's an asshole. No, man, that's not about that. The book's very clear on what we do, right? But healing only happens through time. As you get into your first and second year, there's a lot of doing, staying busy, hitting meetings, doing some inventory. There's a lot of doing. You're starting to learn how to sponsor. Once you hit into like year 3 and 4, it has to change, because a lot of the woundedness and some of the grief and guilt and shame, it starts to come up. Okay. And then at 4, 5, 6, and 7 years, it changes more. So your recovery has to kind of ebb and flow, and you got to be ready for the change. And if you just keep the doing part and you're not keeping really a clean house and you're just living your program with the best of intention, when that deep rooted stuff starts coming up, you're not really ready for it. And watch for this. Watch for people that are 3, 4, 5 years sober, and they start going batshit crazy because they're not doing their inventory. They're not doing the spiritual disciplines. They're not working with others. And then they're like hitting these walls. So you got to be like growing with your recovery, and it takes time also. So time is important also, right? So
God, Creator, I thank you for this beautiful day today. I thank you for my health. I ask today, Creator, for health and healing as I move through my journey of life. Creator, I ask that you show me and guide me, allow me to try to do the next right thing, and allow your Spirit to help guide me. And I ask you, Creator, to remove all the things that aren't you so that I can feel your presence and walk in this life and learn my lessons through the challenges and maybe the mistakes that I make. And I thank you, Creator, for my life and bringing all these beautiful people here, and giving me, an ability, and Janine, an ability to be able to articulate things in a way that people understand. And I ask for a new experience in you, Creator, in the program and in my fellows and in your universe. I ask that you just guide us in a good way and allow us to share our experiences that are best useful tonight for ourselves to grow and learn, get closer to you and anybody on the screen. And I also ask for prayers for that struggling alcoholic or addict, or that person that suffers from the spiritual malady that doesn't know how to get out of it, that you maybe shine that light in there somewhere and let us all be little beacons of light. Thank you, Creator. Hi. Amen.
God, thank you for tonight and getting together to talk about the solution to recovery, which is ultimately a connection with you. Thank you for the fear that you helped me to work through and to continue to do things that I'm afraid of, and help me to be outside of my comfort zone more times than I like to be. Please be with anybody tonight who is struggling and searching within themselves for answers on how to navigate situations, decisions that need to be made. Family members, how to interact with them as Christmas comes up. Be with people who are just struggling with Christmas in general. And allow everyone here to find something in here that answers something or gives comfort in some way. And that we can leave here and have something to pass forward to the next person who's struggling, because ultimately that's the goal, is that we want to carry the message to the people who need it, and to be carrying the message to everyone that we come across, whether it's sponsorship or just being something that's attractive, that we're just in our own behavior and our attitudes, that it's just something that people want, even if they can't put their finger on it, and they come and in that they believe in the solution that we're trying to carry to everyone. Amen.
Okay, Zoom user.
Father God, I come to you tonight to thank you for everything in my life, all the lessons and the blessings that you provide daily in my life. I want to give you gratitude for everything that I've become and guiding me along the way. May you now open my heart and open my ears and close my mouth, so that I may receive the gifts of knowledge through Bill and his partner there. May you please bless everybody out struggling still, and guide us to help one another and to become the best versions of ourselves. I ask these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.
Hi. Ryder, you're up.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here tonight, bringing us all together. Thank you for the life that you have showed me. Thank you for walking with all of us out of the darkness and standing with us in the light. May you watch over our families and allow each and every one of us to make it home to our families each and every day. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here tonight so that we can better understand this sickness and this spiritual malady that we all suffer from, to bring awareness to the people that are still out there struggling on the street. May you watch over them tonight and guide them, guide us, direct us each and every day. Heavenly Father, in your name we pray, amen.
Okay. Awesome. So we're going to start on page 25. Top of the page, 3 lines down, there's a solution. And for anyone that hasn't been with us, just kind of a quick recap. We're really focusing on the spiritual malady in the study. Yes, of course, we talk about the substance. We went heavily through the doctor's opinion and talked about the alcoholic cycle. And, you know, the spiritual malady is the most important thing, i.e. defects of character, i.e. self. And when we get to this part of the book where it says there is a solution, most of us think that, okay, there's a solution to my drinking or drugging problem. And yeah, there is. But really, it's saying there's a solution to the spiritual malady. And the solution of the spiritual malady starts later in this textbook. But it kind of alludes to it here in step 1. So we've gone through a lot of step 1. And then right here, it's saying, okay, here's what it is. And it's referring to something that's further up in the textbook. But we'll touch base on that. And, you know, by focusing on the spiritual solution, you know, you don't want to drink again. And when you build a real relationship with God, not a theoretical one, right? A real relationship through practical application. And you think of the word spiritual, ritual. It's the rituals of what you do in your life that will bring the spiritual to your life. And when the spiritual falls off, then it's just the ritual. And the rituals never stop. That's why we talk about spiritual disciplines. The discipline of what we're doing is so important. A lot of us wait for motivation and we want to be motivated. And sometimes in early recovery and different parts of our recovery, we are motivated. But motivation always wears off. A discipline cannot wear off. That's why it's a discipline. And through the disciplines, you will get what this literature in this program really has to offer. Last week, you know, I got some messages back saying, you know, you helped explain my anger and you helped explain this and you helped explain that. I get odd messages here and there after a study, right? And I'm telling you, I used to be a really violent and angry human being. And my lust was like out of control in my fucking first and a half, second year of recovery. And like through the willingness to do what these books have taught me to do, this one and the 12 and 12, you know, and I got to be careful because Creator shows me who's boss, but in many ways, I've been restored to sanity in my anger and in my lust and in my judgment and all these other things. And over time, this stuff works for everything in your life. And it clears away what's not God, which is anger, lust, porn, gambling, all the shit that makes you do these things. There's reason why we need to seek relief. The ego needs relief. And when the ego needs relief, it's never satisfied. And when you think of the word ego, E-G-O, it's edging God out. It's absence of love because God is love. And when we act in these things, we're actually acting in a fear, and then it perpetuates more. And we'll get more into that as this study goes along. But anyway, anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I have a friend right now and she's not an alcoholic, just struggling with emotional disturbances all over the place, like anxiety and depression. And recently she's gotten into some work stuff and the situations are baffling to her, you know, where I talked to her and now I would have been unable to support her in a way that I would have believed what I was saying. And now I can easily give suggestions that make sense to her. In some way, she is attracted to what I have, although she's not an alcoholic. But the solutions that this program has given me to be able to give to the people in my life, people are attracted to that. And when they take the suggestions, which isn't always, there's healing, there's effectiveness in what's being offered in this book for those types of situations. And so anyways, I got into a conversation with her about like, just do the steps, you know, and we've had this conversation about a dozen times in the last few months. And because she keeps coming to me for these solutions to the problem she can't solve. And I said, like, just do the fucking steps already. And she said, okay, I'm going to get a book. And she goes, but what exactly does this help you with? Like, besides the alcohol, like, and I said, everything. Like, it's helped with everything. I told her about a girl that I met through Bill, actually, in the last study he did. And she came along with a family member and she did the steps and it cured her depression. And so I was telling my friend about this, and this is what it does, is I don't have anxiety anymore, and I don't have depressive episodes anymore. And I have a way out of fear. I have a lot of fear. Like, since I've done my steps, I realize how much fear is in everything that a human being is doing, but I can notice it and I can move through that with the help of a spiritual experience, and relying on God. And so anyways, I talked about this with her, and then I sent her the step 9 promises, and I'm sure she's not going to just jump on going through the steps, but she's definitely attracted to it, and she's contemplating, you know, her next move. And she continues to come towards me with this stuff, and it's been effective for every aspect of my life, which is why I'm so passionate about it. And I believe that it leaks into everything that we're doing in all of our affairs, and it's helped me with parenting tremendously. It's a solution, like the solutions in this book, beyond what it is for the alcoholic, like the practical application of these steps is something even my teenagers are attracted to, and come to me for answers and advice now. So if you're struggling with anything, like, there's so much more to this than just the alcohol. That was just a symbol of the problem. And so now we get into the solution of the spiritual malady.
So I just want to touch base on something. So when you and I met, like, it was about a year ago or so now, right? And Janine had been around the program before, like, a few times, and she was in the rooms and she did whatever the program was before. And then this time around, she's seen that it's actually not what she thought it was. So, you know, when I said earlier that we may go against what the rooms say, because I really do believe the rooms are carrying a message of just don't drink, trying to practice abstinence. Well, how do you fucking stay abstinent from alcohol and drugs when you don't have the power? How do you stay abstinent from anger? How do you stay abstinent from lust? And these things are powerful, and they drive us, and they kind of come up out of nowhere, and they cause us great harm. And if I don't get a handle on, like, the anger, the lust, the self-pity, the bulimia and overeating and all of these other things, I will drink again, because I'm acting in self, I'm acting in that ego. So I'd like, if Janine is able to maybe just articulate, like, you know, the old way that she was learning and how it didn't work. And she then went and tried every other way there was, and ended up having to come back here like a while back. And now the message that she heard is different, and it's actually been the game changer. Would you be able to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. I guess the first thing is that I was younger. I was in my mid-20s when I first went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was attracted immediately to some of the stuff, not all of it, but some of it. And the solutions made sense to me because I had grown up in church. So I really already believed in some of the spiritual solutions that it suggests, you know, with forgiveness instead of holding a resentment and keying a vehicle or whatever, you know, like, forgiveness is the right approach that I know. So there was that. And so I did the things. I took what I wanted and I left the rest. And I also didn't have a full understanding about what defects really were. And I knew what they were, but I didn't know how to remove them. And I thought that 6 and 7 was like a, okay, do and check, and then we're done. And because I was so young, I don't think I had the desperation of a drowning man yet. And then I went on to work into a field that has all kinds of mixed messages. And, you know, I think that a lot of times people come into the rooms to get healing, but they really just want a quick fix. they think they want to get better, but they want the quick fix. And I was kind of that. I was like, oh, there's something easier. There's, there's this type of way, or there's a pill for that, and so I started just trying everything else because I didn't want to concede to my innermost self that I could never drink again. And I chased that delusion into the gates of insanity for sure, where I ended up, the hospital was the better way. It was the end of the road for me, where I just couldn't do it anymore. There was no material fix. There was no pill. There was no therapy. I had tried, I feel like I have tried everything under the realm of new ideas and medicines and doctors. And I really exhausted myself trying to figure it out. And part of that is because there's so much out there, and there's lots of advertising and marketing and money in the pharmaceutical world. And people want to be fixed and they want to be better right away. And this is a lifelong process, and it takes a lot of work. And I don't think that people, when there's an option to take a pill and then there's doing the hard work, people seem to choose the pill more than they want to buckle down and do the hard work, because it is the idea of the instant gratification or the quick fix. And the pain is so great, like that anything that will provide a relief right now, we're going to be grabbing at. And so I had to grab at everything. I had to grab at all of the things that I could think of. And then I came back to this. And the way that I came back to this, because like Bill said, I actually thought that I did the steps and that they didn't really work for me. And I just really didn't think that that was something that I got any relief from, but I really wasn't doing it properly. And I became willing to try it again, because I ended up in a treatment center, and my counselor, she had said to me, I don't know what else I can tell you that you haven't heard before, that you don't know. And that kind of makes me nervous, but I can give you what worked for me. And she said, I've been on the streets for 22 years and all I did was the steps. I worked in, like the violent life, and there was, anything that comes with the streets, and I should have PTSD, and I should be, not sober. I should be dead. And all I did was the steps. And she just took my hand, and she was like pleading with me with her eyes. And she's just like, this worked for me. If you take my suggestions, I promise this will work for you. All I did was go into the rooms. I used the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all I did was the steps, and it worked for me. And I'm 8 years sober, and that's all I can do for you. But I promise, if you do what I suggest, it'll work. And so I went back to my room that night, and I was laying in bed, and I was thinking, like that really does go against all of, the things I hear about the trauma brain, and about relearning things, and about just the amount of work it would take somebody to become restored after being on the streets for 22 years in that kind of world. The amount of therapy that would take, the amount of, medicine and this and that would, and the PTSD and all these things. And I thought, and all she did was the fucking steps. And so I really pondered that, in my bed that night. And I thought, like, and I know she has a happy marriage, and I know that she's effective in her job. And I'm gonna really try to do the steps. And that's what actually got me convinced. And so for that time in treatment, I did nothing but what was in this book. I didn't even read any nonfiction. Like, I just focused on this completely. And I went through it like I was a blank slate and had never been, like that whole set aside prayer. That was kind of like, and she kept saying, smash everything, smash everything. And so every time I would come up with, like, because my mind wanted to go to like a different therapy or a different theory or a different, type of thing that I had heard or done or tried. And she would go smash, smash. And I realized how many old ideas, and it talks about that later in We Agnostics, about the things that get in the way, that block us from God, and old beliefs is like, to me, everything comes back to an old belief. When I'm working with somebody, or I'm talking to somebody, or I'm going through my own stuff, I can always trace it back to what old belief is in my way about something. And so she just kept saying smash, and I kept going back to this book. And when I got out of treatment, that's how I met Bill, because I realized I only could explain up to step 5, because in the treatment center, we do 5, 6, 7, and then like you go through the steps so fast, and 5, 6, 7 are done in one session. And I didn't know how to explain them. And so I ended up at a meeting where they were reading some Drop the Rock stuff. And I'm like, this still isn't helpful. Like, I still don't know what I'm doing. And so I ended up at a meeting where Bill was, and he was talking about why we do step 6 and 7, and like especially 6, and how step 10 is restoring us when we're, and I got so hooked on like, this is going to restore me to my authentic self. And this is the way out, is that every time that I don't act in defect, this is what he was saying that night, every time I don't act in defect, I'm actually giving myself a new experience through God. And those are little increments of me being healed and restored back to the person I was always intended to be before life broke me and before the defects twisted up the person that I was always meant to be in God and in love. And I just heard that, and it's hard to believe that this guy said that, because it sounds so loving and godly. But that I was like, that's it. That is what I want, and that's the why for me. And then from there, and I contacted him, and I was just like, then we became friends. And yeah, like I think that this is the whole thing of it, is the deconstruction of self, and how this process, why it's so painful. You know, later in the 12 by 12 in step 7, where it talks about the emotional turmoil before the surrender. Well, I've had to do that with every defect that I come up against. Is like, there's like this pain I put myself through for whatever reason. It's like, I see the defect, but that doesn't mean I just turn it over. I have to go through the pain to get the emotional surrender. And it's been like that. And he was able to say it goes like this. And that's been helpful to know what's coming up and how to get through that. And that this defect thing, it's a complicated, tricky business. And our defects, it's subtly and blindly, we get driven by this shit. And I believe in this so strongly that I just got into it. And now, since I've been doing this, it was about a year into my recovery, I would say, where I was able to start adding back my work stuff and the stuff that actually was effective. Interestingly enough, it fit right into the 12 steps, like stuff with attachment theory that I like. There's a couple things in my career that have been really effective, and I can see now because I can fit them over top of the steps, and they fit now. And so the steps have actually given me a framework on what to pull and what's been effective and why. And I understand it now through this literature. So it's been pretty fascinating, this whole process. And it has become a framework for what I even want to do, like as I move back into work in Calgary here. And it's been easy to pick what I want to apply for in the direction that I want to go, because this book just has given me an idea of the things that are true with God. I would say like God is truth and love, and to be able to know what is the formula for that, and to go out into the world and to see where that fits has been much, much easier. So it's given me a clarity in my professional life as well that is invaluable. That was a long answer, but
That was
the
fucking
whole
perfect
answer.
answer. And if you guys have any questions as we go, just unmute and bring them up, and we'll try to answer them. And if they take too long, we'll deal with them at the end of the study. Okay, let's rock and roll.
Okay. So there is, at the top of 25 second paragraph, there is a solution. Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings with the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked with others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had never even dreamed. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is absolutely certainly that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in the way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do for ourselves. If you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and we had passed into a region where there is no return through human aid. We had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best as we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. This We did because we honestly wanted to, and we're willing to make an effort.
Okay, so there's the solution. Notice that it's in italics, going back to page 25. Janine had alluded to like some of the pain that we must go through, right? We've been brought up in a society where we're told to avoid pain at all costs. Here, you can take this, you can do this, go here, do this, and have no pain. Get it out of your life. Well, we're human beings that have been designed to have these emotions and to be able to navigate and learn and deal with pain. So we're kind of dishonoring our own consciousness when we don't learn how to deal with pain. But you have now many, many years of our society teaching us don't have to go through pain, which is a farce. When you want real recovery and you want to grow and learn about who you are, pain is necessary. There's a line in the step 10 in the 12 and 12. It says the pains of drinking had to come before sobriety and inner turmoil before serenity. So I'm working with this lady. I've been working with her for about 8 months now, and she is going through some severe pain. And like from my perspective, as I talk to her, and she doesn't really like hearing this, but she's actually more receptive to it than other people have been. Like as far as the pain goes and the growth and where she is and the decisions that she's got to make, I'm like, you're right on track, man. You're right on track. As shitty as that sounds, that's where she's learning and growing. And it has to be that way. And I can't take that part away for her. I can't tell her, okay, take this advice and avoid that and go do this. No. She knows the decisions that she's got to make in her life. We've done enough work so she can go inside and go, okay, where do you not want me? And it's actually in that situation. It's in a relationship situation that she's really made a mess of. But when she got into this relationship, she was a different person. So she used all of her old skills, I'm going to say defects, her old tools and coping mechanisms, her old belief systems to get in this relationship. And then through this last 8 or 9 months, like she's had a full 180 in what she thinks and believes. And the most beautiful part is she sees the value within herself, and she's not like accepting the things outside of herself as what gives her the value. And this person used to like really make a lot of money, and like she's fairly attractive, and you know, blah, 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 the list goes on. But even with all those things, when you look in the mirror and you're not happy with yourself, you're still not happy with yourself. So she's learning, right? And I talked to her today and I said, like, you know, the decisions you got to make. And I'm like, we've both known for a long time. And until you make those decisions and you trust God and you step into the unknown so that you can quit dishonoring your own truth, you're gonna be in this pain. But at least you're not gonna drink or use, as far as I can tell. And that's just kind of the way it has to be. And I can't do anything, right? And she's not running away from me as her sponsor. She's actually staying close. And I just keep reiterating the same thing. The beatings continue till the lesson is learned. And the beatings are continuing and the lesson is learned, but she's too afraid to take that action because she's tied to the emotional security, material security, companionship. She's got some daughters in there. And like, we all try to manage, and like, we're worried about all aspects of these things so we won't make those choices, right? So when we read this line, there's a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, leveling our pride, confessions of our shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. Most people don't know what that line is saying. That line is saying that you're not going to like the process because it is painful. It's self-searching. You're looking within yourself to find out what isn't you. The leveling of our pride. So we're talking about steps 4 and 5 right there. That's where it says the confessions of our shortcomings, what's the process requires. The process of growing out of the spiritual malady starts in the 4 and the 5. That's why when you do a step 3, but you don't do a step 4, you're actually back at step 2. You're not really even at a step 3. Because a step 3, you don't know what your will in your life is. You don't even have really an inclination. what actually happens is your brain thinks it does, but you don't, because it reveals itself in the 4. So a person that's done only the first 3 steps, they're actually only on step 2. There's just a willingness to believe. And that step 3 is just all ego, really. There's some, I'm going to say there's some commitment there from the subconscious, but really you can't see the truth until you put pen to paper in the step 4. And then the confessions of the shortcomings comes through your step 5, where you get more humility, you get more pain in admitting these things that aren't serving you anymore. And then it goes, but we really saw that it worked in others. And that's part of that attraction that Janine's friend has to Janine. Like, something's working in her, and this woman's known Janine a long time. And that's kind of like with me too. I know a lot of people and they want whatever it is. And I just did the steps, and I continue to work the steps in a practical application where God's not a theory every day. Okay. And we had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. That's an important line. I came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of my life long before I ever came to believe in anything else. But I knew my life was futile and I wasn't happy. I just didn't know how to get out of it. And I was trying all the things that society taught me. And I didn't really want a relationship with God. And I thought people that were religious that talked about God or creator or whatever were weak. So that old idea kept me blocked off entirely. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved. My sponsor. So also me to some people, Janine to some people. A lot of these problems are solved, right? There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the 4th dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. And I remember when I first read this line, the 4th dimension of existence, I was like pretty new, like a few months in, and I hated this line because I actually thought that the program was trying to brainwash me to become religious. And then I remember sharing this later on, and some old timers said, I said, you know, this program is just brainwashing me, isn't it? And he's like, maybe your brain needs a good fucking washing. And I sat there and went, kind of right. I think my brain does need a washing. It needs to be put in the sink and scrubbed, and let's get all the old shit out of there because it's not working, right? And that had an impact on me, that little comment of his snarkiness. The great fact is just this, and honestly, this is my life today. And I never believed this. I used to think shit like this was just a selling feature of God, like marketing God. But I can honestly say that I believe this paragraph today. This is the great fact of my life most of the time when self doesn't get in the way. And nothing less, that I've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized my whole attitude towards life.
Can we talk about that for 1 sec?
Sure,
I
go
just
for it.
want to say that the deep and effective spiritual experiences kind of tie into what you were saying up at the top there, where they're painful. The deep spiritual experiences are often really, really painful. Like where I hit a really, really profound turning point in recovery, and I've had maybe 3 that have been just so dark and just lots of unknown. And I'm sort of in one right now where I need to make a move, and it's a fearful step into the next thing, but I have some faith now behind me that I did this before. And I used to use Bill's faith because he had left a job that he was on, and he kind of went into the unknown in the same type of way that I was trying to do when I moved to Calgary. And I left my whole life behind me in Medicine Hat. And so at the beginning there, I was just using Bill's story and his faith, and that things worked out for him. And that was like very dark because I didn't have my own little light in me yet. And I was really holding on to a couple of people that I believed that this stuff had worked for them, right? Like it's talking about where this has worked in other people. And so that was my starting place, that I was using someone else's faith and other people's ideas and experiences until I could have my own. And like now looking back, the profound experiences where I've really gotten deeper in my connection with God has happened through these painful, dark alleys of my recovery. And yeah, it wasn't just, skipping through a prairie and the do. It was like, I'm in the dark and I'm, not wanting to get out of bed, and I'm indecisive and I'm full of fear and I don't know which direction to turn, and I can racing thoughts. And, these things have happened in where the only thing, and my sponsor said, you never know that God is all you need till God is all you got. And that's what I was really clinging to. It's on my fridge. And the last turning point there where I needed to make a move. And it's like, talk about the emotional turmoil before the surrender. Like, that's what it's like. It's like, for me, I was, okay, I got to do this. I got to, and I don't know, the ego is just, I think of it like the Wicked Witch of the West, where every time I do some of this stuff, it kind of melts a bit, but it can rebuild itself so quick. When we're drinking as alcoholics, we quit so many times for real. We swear it off so many times for real, but 3 days later we're drinking again and we forget what it was like. Like, that's how fast the ego rebuilds. So anyways, like when I see something that in somebody that they have, I know now that they went through these painful things. Like, you don't just get to a place with God easy like that. Like, you got to go through the God. I think for me, I had to lean on him to get connected to him. And those moments have been scary. And it's like going to the gym, and I see somebody that I want that physique. I don't just want that physique and then go say, hey, how'd you get that physique? And then just not do any of the things. Like, I have to follow that fitness plan and do those things to get that physique. And it's kind of the same way with recovery. It's like there is some work involved in it and a process involved in it. And the steps have taken me through that. And I found in the steps what I could never find in church, because there was no outline. It was like, here's God, go find him. And I could never really get him in church. And the steps have given me a way to move through these spiritual moments and move into God instead of away from God, or towards the next fix to get me out of myself. I know that I need to go through the pain. And that's been the difference, is knowing the pain's going to come and knowing how to get through it and knowing that it's necessary for me to get to the next level of what I need to be doing. And so pain now is like welcomed, it's expected, and it's now opportunities to grow and to do the thing I need to do. So my perception of what I need, like of pain itself, life is difficult and recovery is going to be painful. And in knowing that, there's a relief, knowing that these things are coming and that the pain is going to come and that that's part of it. And if there is no pain, you're just in your comfort zone. There's no change. You're doing the same thing that you're always doing. And so welcome the pain, because that means that you're on the edge of something better. You're on the edge of change, and that to change, that this book tells me over and over, change is going to be really painful. And I got to have the pain to get to the next place. I got to deconstruct the ego, like the myself has to fall to pieces and be restored, rebuilt. And, the language in this book talks about that as well. Like, we're demolishing and rebuilding, and that is a painful process, but the end result is something great. And so to welcome the pain and don't be scared of it and lean into it. And yeah.
No, that's amazing. And that's the truth, right? It really is. So the great facts is just this and nothing left, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows in God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. And as Janine was kind of talking about the pain, and we talk about the spiritual, as we go through the pain, we often want to just pry and manage and figure it out and avoid it. We're trying to change everything and figure it out. But once you kind of settle in that this is part of the process, you learn that the spiritual disciplines are most important. Am I in fear? I have an inventory process. Let's do the fear. Am I in resentment? I have a resentment inventory. I'm in relationship turmoil. I have relationship conduct. I have pillars. I have God. I have meditation. I have all these things. And these clear-cut directions later in this book allow me to go through the pain doing the things. And when I say the theory of God does not keep you sober or relieve you of the spiritual malady, that's what I mean. Like a lot of us get into this emotionalism. We wallow in emotionalism and we mistaken it for true religious feeling. But that's not what we're talking about. It has to come through practical application of doing the things. Even when it seems like it's the wrong things to do, we don't veer off the plan. We don't veer off the process. The process reveals and gives the results. And the results are here. This is the fourth dimension. And through the processes, it removes everything that's not God. And I'll say, you know, there's a line in step 11 where it says our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. That's kind of like a key line. Your thought life, your consciousness will be placed on a higher plane when your thinking is cleared of you and how you can have or not have or whatever it is. And when you quit manipulating the world to try to give you whatever it is you think you want, you are now relinquishing self. And your thought life gets placed on a higher plane of consciousness. And where you can see the map of consciousness is on Google. If you Google map of consciousness, you will see that our world that we live in out here, it vibrates at a level of 175, which is pride and fear and anger. And, you know, some of it feels okay compared to the lower levels, but that's what our society lives in. The goal for us is to rise above 175, and you will see the different levels and get up into the love one. And where love is it's pretty high up there. But through these spiritual disciplines that we use here, our thought life is placed on a higher plane. And our thinking is cleared of our own selfish motives, and we become naturally of service to our fellows. And then God's no longer theory, and the fucking fourth dimension is something real. And then you can live there for the most part. And every time you don't live in the fourth dimension, okay, now there's another lesson for you to learn. And you may have to, you know, level your pride some more, confessions of your shortcomings. You may have to do more of this, which is a requirement. You don't just finish your steps and move on. These steps are worked in the moment by moment aspect of every interaction with life that we have. That's where step 10 comes in. And step 10 is the most misconstrued, misunderstood step in the program, probably the most important for the fourth dimension access. And then you can actually get into real serious good meditation. And then step 12 becomes just a natural part of the path.
Because when you're doing the step 10s, like the idea is that your 4 and your 5 is clearing the channel, and then you're relinquishing your defects to clear the channel, so that in step 11 you have the channel, so that your mind is intuitively connected to God, so that you have the God intuition, the God conscious that it talks about. That's done through relinquishing self. And so step 10 keeps self out of the way, so that you can stay connected to God through prayer and meditation in step 11.
And 4. And we'll get much more into all of this too as we keep going. So let's keep going. So if you're seriously as alcoholic as we were, or you suffer from the spiritual malady like we do, then there is no middle of the road solution. This isn't like a half game. You do this half-ass, you get less than half-ass results. This is an all-in game, which is why the fellowship of the Spirit, you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. So what that's saying on page 164, last paragraph, is it says, abandon yourself to God through the work. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Admit your faults. Look at these shortcomings. Look at these things that I've done in this world that I'm not happy about. You know, clear away the wreckage of my past. Go make amends. Go make this right. Work that step 6, 7, 8, and 9. Give freely of what you find and join us. So then you give it away. And you give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. Not the fellowship of just don't drink. Not the fellowship if you just have a desire not to drink, you're a member. Yeah, that's great. But that ain't keeping you sober. And if you want to rely on meetings to keep you sober and not ever get into the fourth dimension, fuck, I have pity on you. Because there's so much more to life than going to meetings and white knuckling your sobriety and trying to self-will these principles into your affairs when you don't need to. Right? So there is no middle of the road. This is an all-in game. And for the people that I work with, I fucking try to really implement, like, this is all in. Don't fuck around. Let's really do this to the utmost capacity. And like when me and Janine were building our friendship and she'd be calling in turmoil, and I've called her in situations too, but I couldn't sit there and just stroke her self-pity and say, you know what, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. No, it wasn't going to fucking be okay. And I think that's why I've been effective as a person in this program, that people kind of want what I have, or they're at least willing to listen, because I'm not there to tell you it's going to be okay. I'm going to tell you it's not going to be fucking okay. And when they keep doing the same thing, they see that I'm right. So then they're like, okay, what is it that I'm not doing that you're doing? Well, the results they're there. And that's when somebody really gets willing, because they hit the bottom of self and they can't stop drinking because they won't work on the self part. So I'll finish with this before I move on. And you'll hear this many times. Faith alone is insufficient. The idea of God insufficient. The concept of God insufficient. To be vital, to give you life, the best life, must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. The self-sacrifice isn't, I just go help people. The self-sacrifice is understanding self. Selfish self-centeredness, self-centered fear, self-seeking, self-righteousness. It's understanding self and sacrificing that in the micro moments of your day with God's help, pillars, helps, and the processes of the disciplines in this program, the inventories and whatever. That's how you sacrifice self. And then what happens? You are of unselfish constructive action to people. And it's just a natural part of the process. The only problem is the rooms aren't telling you that. The rooms are giving you some bunk advice. And when you can be that spearhead and you bring this word, what we're talking about, to the rooms, you're going to ruffle some fucking feathers. I'm a professional feather ruffler. But I don't stop because I see the truth, Matt, and it's true. And that's what Janine was actually attracted to when we had the conversation, and I wasn't fucking blowing smoke up your ass. I'm telling you the truth, that it ain't going to be okay. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation. You will blot out the consciousness of your intolerable situation sober, with your defects of character, with men, with women, with sex, with porn. You will continually put things between you and you if you don't understand the program. And many people do that, man. They will blot out the consciousness of their intolerable situation because they're still not happy with who they are, with many different things. The best we could. The other is to accept spiritual help. And spiritual just doesn't mean pray. Inventory, to me, is the most important part of spirituality. When you look at spirituality in our world, most of spirituality doesn't involve deep, meaningful inventory like ours does. And most people who are wanting to do inventory within themselves, they're so blinded by the beliefs, the old ideas like Janine talked about within their own mind, that they can only go so far in the self-reflection. And they still have a lot of ideas that they think are good for them. So they don't actually extract those ideas that they think are good for them. They look at the ones that are bad. But in this program, working with somebody who's like cares more about your life than your feelings and your pillars, they're going to show you some of your ideas that you think are good for you, relationships, jobs, money, whatever it might be. They're going to be like, how is that good for you? They're going to challenge you.
And we need that challenge, and accepting that people do care and they're going to challenge us is really important, because pride wants to say, you know what, fuck you. I don't want to hear that truth, because my truth is something else. And I think I can wrest satisfaction, happiness out of my truth. So I'm fucking out, and then they're out. And I've seen that happen. So the spiritual help, and this we did. Why? Because we honestly wanted to. And we were what? Willing to fucking make the effort. So you got to really want to change, all in, and you got to be willing to make the effort through the action, through the practical application. This program isn't for people that need it or want it. It's for people that want it and do it. You can do this program and not really want it or need it, but if you do the program and you're open-minded, this will change your fucking life. And it's only through the actions, not through the theory. Okay. So anything before we shut her down?
We're gonna take a break, but before that, I just wanted to say that a lot of people come in, like I hear it in the rooms with the resentments toward the church that they were raised in and whatnot, and I was the same. And I was the same because I couldn't find God in church. I couldn't make sense of how to get there. And now, since I've done this stuff, and since my grandma's passed, like Bible verses, I had a sponsee the other day, we were doing some step work at my house, and out of the blue, she hands me this little thing she had laminated. It was just, if you are for God, then who can be against you? And I said, hey, that's a Bible verse. My grandma says this all the time. And she said, really? And I said, yeah. And these Bible verses have been coming in just the funniest ways, where, you know, she just literally pulled it out of her bag and handed it to me. And it was one of my grandma's favorite church songs. You know, if you're with God, then who can ever be against you? And so it comes back to me, and I've developed now an appreciation and an understanding for the Bible stuff in a way that I never could have before. And now it's so relevant. And that's what I mean about this stuff has given me the connection to God. And now that's opened up a whole nother like understanding of the Bible in a different way. And when it says, be quick to see where religious people are right, it's like, now I can see it in so many ways, where before it was such a stretch. So yeah, we can break.
Okay. So we're getting into the story here. The story is about a guy named Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard is vitally important to how the big book Alcoholics Anonymous came to be. Roland actually worked with Ebby, and Ebby was the one who got Bill sober through the Oxford group, or at least came to his house kind of explaining some things. And, you know, there's more to the story, but we won't get into it because there's a lot of pieces to connect. But this is Roland Hazard's story, this certain American businessman. And as we kind of get into this story, you're going to see that they contacted a psychologist, a very famous one, Carl Jung. A lot of us know who he is. And the thing about Carl Jung was Roland Hazard's family was super rich, and they actually tried to get Freud to work with them. But Freud was too busy. And so the family had to go to the second most famous psychologist, which was Carl Jung. The thing about Freud is if Roland Hazard went to Freud, Freud didn't believe in the spiritual aspect, right? He believed in self-will, that we can do this ourselves. And had that happened, we wouldn't be sitting here today. And there's a whole bunch of history in all of this, and I implore you to look that up because it's pretty fascinating how it all came to be. So we'll kind of dissect a little more of that. But yeah, let's go.
A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of the celebrated physician and psychiatrist, Dr. Jung, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with an unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to this doctor whom he admired, and he asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatsoever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers may think that he could do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of this conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," said the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be the nature of a huge emotional displacement and arrangement. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of men, are suddenly cast aside, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some of such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I have employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description." Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital experience.
Okay. So back on page 26, halfway down the page, above all, Roland, he believed that he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Well, a lot of us do that, right? And, you know, maybe Janine, based on her old life and learning all of these like scientific ways, and I know not for me, because I didn't actually, this ain't my experience, but a lot of people think that because they've learned so much about the disease that they got it figured out. Right? The book says self-knowledge. It's a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize. That no matter how much you know about you or you know about the disease, that's not enough. And the result was, nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he learned from Carl Jung all these things about himself. And then he leaves Carl Jung after a year. And he's not even, so this is in Europe, he's not even on the boat yet to come back to America, and he's drunk. And he's baffled because he doesn't even know how he got drunk. Well, we read in previous pages, the mental blank spot, right? This inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. At a certain point, the alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first drink. His defense must come from God. So he didn't have an effective mental defense, even though he knew a lot of things about himself. It didn't help him. So he relapses. He goes back to the doctor. He's begging the doctor, like, dude, basically Carl Jung's his higher power, right? Because it's his last resort. And he's begging the doctor, like, dude, why? How? I need help. Please help me. And Carl Jung's like, dude, you're one of those hopeless fucking alcoholics. There's really no hope for you. I don't really know what to tell you, bro. And so Roland Hazard is like getting scared because his only hope is like this doctor. And then, you know, it says, the doctor said, "You have a mind of a chronic alcoholic, Roland. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind exists to the extent that it does in you. Our friend has felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang.
The doctor's saying, I got nothing for you, bro. I don't really know what to do. You're one of those. We're all rolling hazards. So this story's super important. And then what happened? The gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. Roland knew he was fucked, right? That's what the step one literature in this program does with the substance and with the defective character. And more so the defective character with, like, say, step 4 or 5. But the gates of hell have to close on you with a clang. You got to know that you don't have any more options. You're optioned out. That's what Roland felt. And he had a deep level concession that he was doomed. So that makes a person willing to seek a solution with the desperation of a drowning man. The problem with our program and people, alcoholics and addicts, is they never understand the true nature of their problem. They don't understand that they're actually doomed. And as you go through the step 1 literature, and if you've gone through it properly, you'll know you're doomed. And you will seek step 2 to 12 as the desperation of a drowning man.
I think too, like there's an example in the book where you could, like Dr. Bob, he was already, mingling with the Oxford group, and he was trying to have a spiritual experience, or was, like God was in there somewhere in the mix. And it took Bill to come and say, like, hey, like, this is what's going on. Once we drink, we get this phenomenon of the craving, and we got a mental blank spot. And that's the point at which the book says, at this point, he sought God out with an enthusiasm that he never had before, because he knew the nature of the illness. So it takes these pieces to all come together when you're working with someone in step 1. Like, they have to understand that it's the alcoholic, like we're allergic to alcohol, the phenomenon of the craving, the blank mental spot, and that we need a spiritual solution for the problem. And we need those 3 things there. And those are examples, like all the examples in this book, I think are divinely inspired, just the way that if you know the history, how this stuff has come together, it's amazing. But I think each character, each story is in there so intentionally. And Dr. Bob, he needed to know the nature of the illness. He already had the spiritual stuff going on in the background, and the nature of the illness is what kind of got him sober. Like, that was the missing piece. So you need all the pieces.
Yeah. And step 1 is so important, because if you don't understand step 1 in its entirety, you won't seek the rest of the solution. You will piecemeal it. And like Dr. Bob, for so many years, he couldn't stay sober. But then Bill showed up at his house and talked to him, not about Bob's drinking, about his own drinking. How when he picked it up and put the first sip in, he was no longer drinking to escape. He was drinking to overcome the physical craving in his body beyond his mental control. And at a certain point, he had no effective mental defense. Probably talked to, Bob about all these mental defenses that he used, but then he found himself baffled and he was drunk again. And Dr. Bob's like, hey, that's me. And then from there, it kind of grew, right? And Dr. Bob would never do amends. And finally, this guy, there's a story behind this too, but he finally went and did all of his amends. And Bill and Lois thought he was out getting drunk, but he had actually gone out and cleaned his side of the street and then did the rest of the steps. And, Dr. Bob was only in the program for 15 years. And he worked with over, I think it was 5,000 alcoholics in 15 years. He spent his whole life just working with alcoholics once he got the solution. Anyway, so as Roland has, the gates of hell close on him with a clang, he's like desperate, and he's asking the doctor, is there no exceptions? And he's like begging him. And then the doctor says, yes, Roland, there are. There is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are a phenomenon. And why is it a phenomenon? Well, it's very similar to the phenomenon of craving, because we don't fully know how it works. And even with the spiritual experience, we don't fully know how that works either. But God is so much more powerful than any of our intellectual minds. God is powerful, so God is a phenomenon, right? They appear, this is it. This is what a spiritual experience is, a vital spiritual experience. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So what is that? You know, if you go, let's do a quick flip to the back of the book on page 567. We're just going to look at what a spiritual experience says in the big book. So 567. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Upon careful reading shows the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. That's the key right there. The spiritual experience isn't a profound one moment thing. It's many micro changes in the way that we think and we view life and we view ourselves. We have an ideology of how we are, and you've heard people say, you know, this is just how I am. Well, we got to root what we think and how we are up to see what the truth is. And as we start seeing the different truths, we start changing and bringing those things to light, casting them to one side, and allowing a whole new set of conceptions and motives to dominate us, which is what the steps do, which is what the spiritual principles do. So I take the ego and fear that I live with, I expose it for what it is, and then I cast it aside and I bring in God and I bring in prayer, meditation, pillars, and I do all these things. So anyway, it's a personality change. And if you don't change who you are as a person through the personality change, the old person will always drink again, because your ideas, emotions, and attitudes that actually run your life will always hit the trigger that says, I need a drink, I need it now, what's always given it to me, and then you're drunk again. So these things need to be exposed, extracted, and discarded, and a whole new set of conceptions have to dominate you. The problem is the domination part of these new attitudes is really hard and painful. So let's keep reading. To bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true, our first printing gave many readers the impression that the personality changes or religious experience must be in the nature of sudden spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire immediate and overwhelming God consciousness. See, that's not what we typically need. That's not what's going to happen for most people. Followed at once by a vast change in our feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, they're around, I don't see many of them, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety. That's how we do our spiritual experience. We learn it in little increments, and we're being educated about ourselves. And the word self actually has a different connotation. And typically in our world, when we think someone tells us you're selfish, self-centered fear, I take offense to that, because the world has taught me that's really negative to be like that. But when I take the position that I'm an alcoholic and I'm driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, self-seeking, self-centeredness, and I just go, okay, that's just a fact. That is part of what I am. Then the old judgment of what it was goes away, and I can actually work on my selfishness and self-pity, and I can look at it without the pride resisting it. So that's important. Because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such change would have hardly been brought about by himself alone.
That's where God comes in and your pillars. It doesn't happen on your own. I know for me, I always wanted to change things about myself. And I would try with the will, but I would always fall back to my old patterns. I wanted to be nice to my wife and say nice things always, but I was always driven and my subconscious just did what it wanted. The lie that we're told is that we are able to control ourselves. The actual truth is the subconscious actually runs your whole life. That's why you're powerless over anger, over anxiety, over these fears. That's why sometimes you can't speak or whatever it might be, because the subconscious actually runs the whole show. And that kind of brings me back to that in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Maybe I'm living my whole life based in a trauma and I put myself in such a small box and I've never thought that I should look at it. Well, I need to look at that. Huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were once the guiding force in my life. Those are all my thoughts, all my belief systems, what I think about you, what I think about me, what I think about the world. And how did I get a lot of these? Well, Janine talked about it earlier. The journey of life breaks us down. And a lot of the beliefs that we think are good for us aren't good for us. We just don't know any different because society's taught us that. And I'll just finish with this on this spiritual experience page. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such change could hardly been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could have seldom been accomplished by years of self-discipline. So it's telling me if I go through this literature, step 1 to 12, it should happen in a few months, and I will have a pretty good alteration in the way that I think and view life.
I just wanted to give an example of the ways that society can put some beliefs in, particularly the ones that really breed addiction. So the idea that life isn't difficult, that's one, and that pain should be avoided, that would be 2. But then as kids, I think a lot of times emotional support isn't really provided in the way that a person needs to develop emotionally healthy ways of responding to situations. So even like the parents, the best of times, like I know that you can be dismissive, parents, they want to see their kids happy. So it's like, and I work with parents, right? I've worked with lots of parents in my career. And so this is something that comes up a lot, right? They want to see their kids happy. They don't want their kids to be sad. And that makes them feel, a certain way about their parenting and about themselves. And so they want to dismiss or distract the emotion. And so it can look like the kid is upset. And it's like, don't worry, you have lots of friends. Or don't feel left out. You got your next door neighbor buddy, and just really dismissing the child's experience instead of just saying, yeah, it sounds like you felt left out today. And just labeling the emotion and letting them sit in it. Because then you know what happens? The kid learns to label the emotion and then they okay, well, and then they go on. But dismissing the emotion like, oh, it's going to be okay, focus over here, or it's going to be okay, let's go to the candy store, or, don't worry about that. You're going to stress your dad out, like lots of just negative ways of managing emotions. And we don't do that to our kids on purpose. And I did that to my kids. And it's because nothing was ever taught to me to do differently. And so I think a lot of times society grows us up in a way that we're trying to distract ourselves out of emotions. We're trying to dismiss the negative emotions that we have. And we just never learn how to sit with them, and then we stop using a substance. And then what? We're left with all of our emotions, and early recovery is this roller coaster of emotional experiences and trying to navigate those. That really is the crux of early recovery. And it's the goal of this, like what we're trying to do here is achieve emotional balance. And so learning how to deal with our emotions and the ways that we go up and down with them, and to react and respond in a mature, healthy, emotional way.
Awesome. So just to reiterate, the vital spiritual experience, to me, these occurrences are phenomenon. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements, rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. That is what the steps do. They extract them, they bring them to the surface, and it's painful because you've been running on a lot of these things your whole life. Some of them go against the belief systems that you've been indoctrinated with, and it doesn't seem right. Common sense thus becomes uncommon sense. So the steps, the first set of steps that you do, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they do this at a surface level, but it's deeper than you've ever done it before in your life. So there's a lot of profound alterations in the way that you see yourself and people. And because the program is so heavily based in bringing God into this, you start seeing things much different, and you start going to God because you believe God is doing it. And I do believe God does do it. So I'm going to go down a little bit further. In fact, I've been trying to produce such emotional rearrangements within you, Roland. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful. So he's saying, well, I use the psychological approach, psychiatry approach, counseling approach, and with many of the people that I work with, it is successful. But I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. So it might work for the heavy drinker and the moderate drinker, but it's not working for the real alcoholic, who this book is written for. Okay. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope was, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, it did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So Roland's listening to Carl Jung, and Carl Jung's kind of talking about this spiritual experience, and Roland's like, fuck, no problem. My whole family's religious, and I believe in God, and I go to church, and I do all these things. So he's relieved, right? And then the doctor says to him, you know what, bro? This hope was, however, destroyed. He's like, sorry, bud, that's not it. You can have a belief, you can have the concept of God, you can go to church, and you can pray in the morning, and you can pray at night. You can do those things and have the theory of God in your life, Roland, but it does not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience that you need, bro. Well, how do we get that? Well, we get it through the practical application of the directions in the book. God starts working in and through us through the practical application of the book. So a lot of people in this program take this book, they read it, they do the steps, and this is all warm and fuzzy, and oh, me and God and me and the big book, and oh, everything's so good. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. I am now becoming philosophically comforted by what I'm reading here and the book in general. And we could will these things with all of our might, but the needed power was not there. As marshaled by our own will, we fail, and we fail utterly because we're still running the show. Through the directions contained in this book, we don't work with God as a theory. God starts working in our lives. The only problem with that is it really fucks up your ideas and your little plans and designs of what you want in life. You have to start doing things that you don't want to do. You have to start going against like counterculture. We're going against a lot of what society belief systems are in this program and how things should go. But if you want to hit the fourth dimension, it's a necessary part of the process.
So 28. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that for all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we form a relationship upon the simple understanding terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it of no concern what our religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair with which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears to be an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we have found such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we have recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in their personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way that he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that we will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing.
Okay, so just on page 29, where Janine just finished reading. Further on, clear-cut directions. Super important. That's what the book is. You want to know what practical application is? The directions are in the book, and they're hidden around a whole bunch of fluffy shit. But once you learn the directions, then you can really grow and learn about who you are and have your creator enter into your heart in your life that is indeed miraculous. Through the directions, not the philosophy, not the theory, okay? Showing how we have recovered. Recovered from what? The spiritual malady. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Okay, so there's 42 stories in the back of the book. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language, from his own point of view, the way he established a relationship with God. It doesn't say that they figured out how to stay sober. It says that these people established a relationship with God, therefore they never had to drink again. They learned how to turn their will and their life over to God, and then the result was you don't need to drink. It doesn't say anything about the stories in the back of the book that it tells you how to get sober. The stories teach you how these people built a relationship with God. Okay. Now I'm going to go to page 28. Middle of the page, I just underlined one word or one sentence. It says, as soon as we were willing and honest enough to try. So are you willing and are you honest enough to try what is contained in the clear-cut directions of the book? That's important. Now just up a little bit. We in turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. Think of that. Think about you drowning in a little part of a lake. Okay, you're drowning, you can't swim, and you're like desperate to fucking stay alive because God gave us the willingness to want to live. But if you can't swim, you can't swim, and you're like desperate and you're flailing and you're trying to keep your head above water. That's the kind of desperation of a drowning man that we do this program. Okay, what seemed at first a flimsy reed. So I grab onto this flimsy reed, and you guys all know what reeds are. They're those like fucking thin little pieces of vegetation that can't even hold their own weight, and they fall over on themselves. And if I'm dying in a pool of part of a lake, and I'm going to grab onto that flimsy reed. And of course, it doesn't make sense that that would save me, but that's what happened for me. I was dying, and I grabbed onto this flimsy reed with the desperation of a drowning man. And what at first seemed a flimsy reed has gradually proved to be the powerful and loving hand of God. This program, this book, the things that we do that I had no conception of, that it would give me the life that I have today. I just grabbed onto it because I had nothing left. And I would think that I would still drown based on holding this flimsy reed. But it has actually pulled me out of the water and had me put in God's hands. And that's the powerful, loving hand of God that's worked in my life through following this, because I was honest and willing enough to try. And I still do. because this journey of the steps doesn't end with your first set of steps. This journey continues every single day out of this book, out of these disciplines. There are those too who cannot or will not give themselves completely to the simple program. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. The word rigorous means accurate. This program and these steps will allow you to get truthful, accurate with what and who you are, with a sincere attempt to become who the best you can be. That's what this is all about in a nutshell. But it takes discipline, and it takes willingness, and it takes you learning everything. Everything is a lesson as you go through this journey. When everything is a lesson in your life and you quit blaming everybody else and you start pointing the finger back at you and going, what's the fucking lesson for me? I know so many people that I pick up the phone and it's bitch about this person, that person, the world, blah, blah, blah. No. The spiritual axiom that every time you're disturbed, the problem's fucking within you. When you start working that step 10 process, the beginning, yeah, you're activated to do the step 10 process by the external aspects of life. But as you work that clear-cut direction in step 10, it will turn over time, and you will see that it's not the people and the situations in life fucking you. It's you that fucks you. And then you start having compassion for other people and yourself, and then love and tolerance of others is our code. And you start understanding other people's shortcoming viewpoints, and you respect for their opinions because it's an attitude that makes you more useful to others, because you start seeing that everyone's having their own struggle. Nobody's intentionally doing anything. They're all driven by their subconscious broken parts of themselves, just like you. We speak of intolerance while we're intolerant ourselves. I'm going to blame all you, but really I'm doing the same thing too. So this process takes great willingness. And the fellowship of the Spirit is the one you want to enter into. And it takes time, takes willingness, dedication, commitment. Step 6 is the essence of what we're talking about. Like, honestly, step 6 is the essence of this. What are you fucking laughing at?
I was like, oh, he's about to say step 6. And then there was a moment of silence and you produced. I was also thinking about a teacher I had along the way and the spiritual axiom thing you just said. And it was helpful for me she gave a visual and she said, imagine that you're running around with like a little light socket on your stomach. And it's like, you think of every time you get electrocuted by something out here, you got to look at what is in you that's causing the jolt. And that visual was it was a game changer for me. And it's so relevant. And then that is the spiritual axiom, right? Like if you think of it like that. So if you're getting electrocuted by the drama out there and by people's choices, decisions, all the things, and you find yourself being electrocuted on the inside, that's an indication to stop and really look at what is going on inside of you. Where is the disturbance actually coming from within you? That's all.
Yeah, and it's driven by fear. It's driven by self-worth. It's driven by the need for validation on the old ideas, emotions, and attitudes. And then we extract them, and then we're able to see the truth of these things. But some of these truths, like who wants to absolve somebody of their actions? That's fucking too painful. I want somebody to blame. I need somebody to blame. And I always get that blame validated by buddy next door and my friend down the road. Hey, did you see what these guys did? Yeah, those fucking assholes, go punch them out. Yeah. So I'm getting validated constantly from the society I live in to work in these fears and this force. That's why God-centered 12-step people are so important to talk to your life about. Not just your alcohol problem, because your alcohol problem is only a problem because life is the problem. You got to talk about life.
And the common sense becoming not common sense type of thing is like, I could phone somebody who's not God conscious, and not seeking to God for a solution. And, I can talk about how angry I am about a certain thing. And likely I'm going to get that co-signed and then, yeah, fuck that asshole. And, go key his car, or hold the resentment or, whatever. Right. Don't invite him to the Christmas party, don't answer his calls, block that motherfucker, whatever the feedback is. Whereas if I call somebody who's working it within the design for living, the feedback is going to be very different. And I've found that when I am talking to people outside of this and they're giving me the co-signing stuff, I get off the phone and it might feel good in the moment, but I get off the phone and I'm sicker than when I picked up the phone. My spirit is way worse than when I picked up the phone, versus when I call somebody and they tell me the truth within this book, like you're disturbed because of whatever, what kind of self are you living in? And the anger isn't co-signed, and I get a different spiritual feeling. Like, even though the truth feels not as good as the validation in the first call there that I gave as an example, I get off the phone and my spirit settled in the truth with that. And I can look inside of myself, which is the only thing I can actually control anyways. And so there's no more insanity bred, because if I keep doing the ways of the world, I keep making more problems for myself. And the ways of the world, they cause a lot of, it's a lot of insanity when I look at the way that, people are responding to each other. And it's like, that's not the way that this book tells us to do it. And therefore, I just conclude that, you're going to be spinning in so many problems. When I read, the problems become so astonishingly difficult to solve. It's because I was trying to use the formula of society to solve my problems, and they just kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And I didn't know which way to go with it. And I didn't even know what I was doing wrong. So I really believe in this as the design for living, to reduce any of, and I don't get the excess drama anymore today. That's probably, one of my top 3 favorite things about being sober using the design for living, is that I don't have the drama. I can solve problems in a kind of a crisp, clean way that don't create more problems, and that I feel good about.
It's amazing.
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at Billwardlife to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.